So I just gave somebody else an analogy because I've noticed that a lot of people above 50, even people my age, don't understand what to do in a serious situation. Like, for instance, I was left for 2 days in a house with two people watching me bleed unconscious while they were doing awful things to me, too. Now, that isn't because they wanted to do awful things. It's not because they wanted to leave me. It's because they didn't understand what to do in these situations. And I'm going to give you an analogy, and I'm going to give you what some people do, and it's wrong, and then I'm going to tell you what you should do, and it's right. So, if let's say there's two people living in a house, one's elderly, one is disabled. If you got the disabled person on the ground bleeding, you get him help right away. That's simple. But now I'm going to give a harder example that has more details. Now, this is a analogy. This has never happened, but keep in mind, I have known for years what to do in these type of situations, but I'm trying to teach other people what to do in these serious situations, how to ask for help, who to go to, what type of doctors, what agency, stuff like that. It's a little problematic when people aren't honest, though. I've seen a lot of people think that they can fool the system. You can't. There's investigators that do their due diligence. You can't fool the system. But a lot of these other people with lower intelligence think that they can outsmart the system and then get themselves into trouble. So keep that in mind as well, that's a real problem what I see with a lot of people. But here's the analogy. I'm in the house. The elderly person in their 80s who has a heart condition is in the house. I got my rent money. The other person has their rent money. But their rent money is in the bank account. The landlord's going to pick them up and bring them to the bank. The landlord's on their way to get the money. He's mad because the household is, let's say, 5 days late. Well, we had to wait for the money to hit the bank, and now that the money hit the bank, my roommate finally could pay the rent, and the landlord's made several threats, will say, like, if you don't pay today, you're out. If you don't pay today, you're out. Making those tenants very worried about their home security. Okay, so we're waiting. The person's stressed out. They're calling the bank to double check. And then all of a sudden, the elderly person grabs his chest, starts kind of going on the floor, gasping for air, an obvious medical event. Now, the other party should do what? They should get the individual help, call an ambulance, explain the symptoms, and get him to the hospital. Call the landlord, tell him he's going to have to wait because there was a medical emergency, and explain the situation to the landlord. That's the proper way to handle this. But the way that a lot of people handle this is wrong. I see a lot of situations that they handle it in this way. Okay, so you got a person on the floor. They're gasping, they're shaking, they're having a medical event. The landlord's 15, maybe 20 minutes away, 15 minutes away. And now you're worried about losing your apartment. You go, oh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Now, I just told you how to properly handle this. You get the person help and you deal with whatever comes next. You just tell the truth, you're honest with people, and then you just hope everything works out. But other people don't want to do it that way. Instead, I've seen people do it, and this is an analogy for what they're doing, but it's the same action, it's the same thought process I see all the time with people. They go, oh, no, 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 well, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to lose my apartment. The landlord's going to scream at me. So then they go to the bank with the landlord themselves, or they take a bus to the bank. They pull out the money. They pay the landlord first, and then they call for help for the person. That's not right. You cannot do that. People can die or get hurt when you do stuff like that. And I see it all the time. When I have a seizure and I'm bleeding on the wall needing help, I see these people doing stuff exactly like this. You don't go and get the money, pay the landlord, and then call the ambulance. No way. That's just crazy. That would be totally crazy to let somebody suffer like that, possibly die, all because you're worried about your home security. That's wrong. No, you get him help, and then you explain the landlord, hey, the card is with him at the hospital. I had a call. Well, you just called me 30 minutes ago. Oh, I know, but in those 30 minutes, he had some event, some medical event, and I had to call an ambulance. Well, I think you guys are stalling. Well, you can think whatever you want, but he has paperwork at the hospital. This happened. Here's my half of the money. When Dave gets out of the hospital, I'm sure he'll be happy to run his debit card for you. And that's the situation you use. You tell the landlord, this is what happened. This is the truth. I'm sorry that he's now with his card someplace where you can't get to it. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. I had a call for help. I couldn't wait 15 minutes for you to get here, then take his card and go with you. No. I also don't know where his card is, and I'm not going to go through a dying man's pockets either. No, I'm going to call for help for him. I'm going to get him the help he needs, and then I'm going to explain when the doctors come up and ask me what happened. I'm going to explain. He dropped to the floor. He was gasping for air. His hand was on his chest where his heart is, and it seemed like he might be shaking or not able to stand up. And then you give that description to the doctors, and you also give that description to the landlord. That way, when he's mad, oh, well, you guys just called 30 minutes ago saying that you guys had the money. And you say, yes, we do. It's on his card, but he had a heart attack or some medical event, and I had a call for help. By the time you got here, they already pulled him out of here. If that's what really happened, then that's what you should go with. You should go with honesty, the truth, and just explain that to people. And usually, God will help you. Usually, things will work out, and you can just leave your worries on God. I have a tattoo on my arm. It's a very, very good prayer that I practice a lot. And I suggest that you look it up and practice it if you're an addict, or if you worry about stuff, or if you even have anxiety. I highly suggest you practice this prayer. The prayer is Peter 1, chapter 5, verse 7 through 10. I'll repeat that. It is Peter 1, chapter 5, verse 7 through 10. It explains on how putting your anxieties onto God and to beware of the devil, because he's a lurking lion. And that has to do with drinking, how you should beware of the devil of alcohol. As well as when you have anxiety, you should not act on it. You should not feed into it. You should put that anxiety onto God. So in this situation, your anxiety would be, you are worried that the landlord might evict you because you don't know. You just called him, told him you had the money, you have your money, but now your friend with his debit card is on the floor and he's on his way to the hospital because you called 911. Now, if you worry about that too much, maybe you commit a sin, like waiting and trying to get the money first. That's awful. That would be an awful thing to do. You never do something like that. You never will make somebody wait during a heart attack just so the landlord gets paid. That would be ridiculous. That would be stupid. No, what you do is you get the person help and you worry about the landlord when the person gets out of the hospital. Even though the landlord said, if you don't have the money today, you are evicted. Well, we do have the money today. The money's just in the hospital with this individual in his pocket, and he didn't make it to the bank with you. That's all. And you just explain this. But I see a lot of people who would have gone with, well, I'll just grab the card out of his pocket. Or, well, I'll just go to the bank real quick with the landlord, come back, and then get help. Or I'll meet the landlord outside with the card, and then I'll go get help and come back. Remember, this is an analogy, a situation that I made up to explain a common occurrence that I see. People do not understand how serious a situation is, and they put these worries and make things worse. They feed on these worries and they make things worse. And for years now, about 10 years, I've definitely worked on my worries, my anxieties, and it's done wonders for me. But now all I have to work on is my health. I have my nervous system, I have my neurological disorder, and that's causing other injuries like my GI, ankle injuries, head injuries, things like that. As well as cold triggers it, so I have to be very cold with the triggers that trigger these seizures. And so I'm using this as an example to explain what I've seen from other people. So just keep that in mind, that what you do is what's right, no matter what else is going on around you. Doesn't matter if the landlord is making threats that you're going to lose your home. This is an emergency. This is a serious situation that requires action right now. So you make that action. You get the person help right away. You get them to the hospital. And then you deal with the landlord later, and you deal with the consequences of getting that person help. And God will work it all out. If you're helping somebody, if you're doing good, then usually things work themselves out. But if you're acting selfish, deceptive, or trying to hide something, that's when things don't work out. So keep that in mind. Honesty is always the way to go, even if people don't want to listen, even if it gets them angry, even if it upsets them. Honesty is always the way to go. So just get that person help and then be honest with the landlord. Get some paperwork, and things will work themselves out. But don't try to grab the debit card, go get the money, and try to deal with that while the person's on the floor. No way. You don't wait days, you don't wait months, you don't wait hours. No, you do it right then. You help when you can. If you have a way to help somebody, you do it. And that's what I do. When I see people struggling and I have the tools to help them, I do it. But that's only when it's real warm and my nervous system is doing good, or I'm indoors where there's heat, or the certain circumstances. When I'm outside during winter, I can't even help myself. I barely can walk. Even when I was a kid, I'm cold and it didn't really do well with me. When I lived in Texas, remember, this is El Paso, Texas. During the day, when it was about 70, there was a wind chill, some wind coming in with sand. I wore a heavy winter jacket or a heavy suede jacket, and maybe it was warmer, it might have been 80, and everybody thought I was nuts. That's because when the breeze hit my skin and the sand hit my skin, it caused this awful feeling going down my spine, a pain that I've had for 25 years. And so I just wanted to explain that I've been dealing with this for 25 years, but a lot of people don't try to help. They don't try to take it seriously. They move me around. They try to find excuses. I mean, and that's just not my family. That's people in general. My roommate now, the people I take care of, even the authorities. I've literally shook in front of the Department of Health and Human Services, and they don't have many questions. They don't seem to have any answers. That's because they don't really want to invest money in me. And that's wrong. That is wrong. When people have been going through something like this, you don't just leave them to die. And I have seen multiple people on the side of the road close to death while people walk by them. And guess what? I saved their lives. When somebody's in danger, I stand up and do what needs to be done. And I wish everybody else knew that too. Their souls would be a lot cleaner if you could learn that. But there are a lot of people out there who won't even make an emergency phone call to an ambulance because they're afraid their phone will get stolen. Just because you might have to buy a new phone is no reason to let somebody die. There's no reason why somebody should have like an hour. If you leave somebody who's having a stroke on the ground for an hour, or if somebody is having a seizure from the cold and then you leave them there, and then they have another seizure an hour later and they can't get up, and then you leave them there, and then they have another seizure an hour later and you leave them there, that can cause permanent damage to the body. Meanwhile, if somebody just calls for help, maybe they get them into the ambulance, maybe they go to a proper hospital, and maybe you get treatment. But see, in my life, I've noticed that a lot of people don't want to do that. And that causes a lot of problems. So I highly suggest listening to my metaphor and trying to learn from it. And maybe society can move forward and we can act a little better to one another. Maybe we can all treat each other with a little more respect. Maybe we can treat each other's bodies with a little more respect. That would be good, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be great if every person on this earth cared about one another and didn't want to hurt one another and didn't do damage to one another? That would be fantastic. And all it requires is this first step. When you see people in need and you have the tools to help them, and that's just all, then just do it. If the consequences if you lose an hour of your time, or if the consequence is maybe you have to make a phone call or you have to ask for a phone number to prevent your phone from getting stolen, then do that. Do whatever it requires. If it's hard, do it hard. If it's easy, do it easy. But just get it done.